My name is Aurora. I'm 24, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I once believed in fairy tales. I believed in love. I believed that my wedding night would be the most magical moment of my life, a fresh beginning, a page full of promise. But life didn't ask me what I wanted. It simply pulled the curtain and revealed the harsh truth. That night, I didn't begin a new life. I began to break. It all happened too fast. A marriage proposal came from my father's lifelong friend. "James is a good boy. You'll be safe with him," my father said, his eyes filled with faith. But did anyone ask me? Did anyone look into my eyes and ask a simple question? "Do you want this?" I had never met him, never heard his voice. I hadn't even seen a picture. Everything was decided by others, by words, by tradition, by handshakes, never by my heart. When his family came over, they smiled sweetly and said, "Your daughter is gentle and pure. She'll be a blessing to our son." My parents nodded, proud. They believed they were giving me a beautiful future. But they didn't know they were unknowingly sending me where I didn't belong. I wore a red wedding dress, smiling through invisible tears. The wedding looked like a dream. Flowers, lights, laughter, congratulations. But my heart trembled. I didn't know anything about the man standing beside me. Did he even know my name? Did he know what my dreams once were? I thought that night would be the beginning of love. But it turned out to be the end of me. It was a stunning day, almost unreal. Flowers covered the hall like a fairy tale garden. Golden lights shimmered like late afternoon sun. Everyone said I was the happiest bride they had ever seen. I smiled, I nodded, I said thank you. But deep down, I was just playing the biggest role of my life. I wore the traditional red dress, the color of happiness, of luck. I looked in the mirror and told myself maybe it will be okay. Maybe love will come later. I wanted to believe that if I tried hard enough, this new life wouldn't be so bad. The wedding felt like a dream, but the wedding night was the moment I woke up. The room was luxurious, yet cold. The man in front of me, my husband, didn't say anything soft. No tender glance, no reassuring touch, just silence and a look that said I was something he now owned. I realized I wasn't a wife. I was a gift, a transaction between families. There was no love, no connection. Only one thing was painfully clear. I wasn't cherished, I was claimed. And in that moment, every hope I carried into that wedding day, every innocent dream of a new beginning, shattered without a sound. The moment the bedroom door shut behind them, Aurora felt a chill spread through her bones. It wasn't the cold air. It was the way he looked at her. No smile. No gentleness. No questions. In his eyes, there was no affection, only one thing that spoke louder than words. Possession. She had never felt anything like it. She wasn't a bride, not a woman to be cherished, not even a person. She was something that had been handed over, and now he was ready to unwrap what he believed he owned. He didn't ask her how she felt. He didn't care about the fear in her eyes or the trembling of her hands. He touched her not with warmth, but with indifference. Her body froze. Her spirit left her. She could feel herself breaking silently, as though her soul was shattering into invisible pieces no one would ever see. When it was over, she thought perhaps he would soften, say something, anything. But instead, he stood over her with cold disgust and said words that pierced deeper than any wound. "You are not pure." She couldn't speak, couldn't cry, couldn't breathe, because in that one sentence, he erased her truth. Aurora had never loved another, never kissed, never held hands, but none of it mattered. No one would care. Truth did not survive here, only judgment. And in that judgment, she saw the truth. She was not a wife. She was not a partner. She was a product in a transaction. And now the buyer had found her defective. She did not scream. She did not protest. She lay still, eyes wide open, but her mind had already fled far away to a place where no one could reach her, a place where silence reigned, and the only sound that echoed in her soul was a single desperate thought. I have to escape, no matter what it takes. That morning, the sun rose not to bring warmth or hope, but to expose the cold reality Aurora was now trapped in. The light touched her face just as his voice cut through the silence. No tenderness, no remorse, only a cold command that shattered what was left of her dignity. Leave this house, and don't say a word about what happened last night. She stood frozen. Her body still ached, her heart barely holding together. And now she was being thrown out like garbage, like a broken item returned after disappointment. She wanted to scream, to ask why, but her lips stayed sealed. There was no use. No one would listen. No one ever did. When she returned to her parents' house, Aurora said nothing. They noticed the change, the blank stare, the silence, the heavy footsteps, but they chose not to ask. Maybe they didn't want to know. Maybe they already did. So she retreated into the room where she once dreamed of fairy tales, and now sat like a ghost of herself, staring into nothing. She curled up in a corner, not crying, not angry, just hollow, a void inside her growing with every breath. She clutched her knees, trying to hold herself together. The question echoed in her mind like a cruel whisper. Why me? What did I do wrong? Do I deserve this? But the silence answered with more silence. She collapsed, not because she was weak, but because she had been emptied of every drop of hope. And yet, even in that darkness, even when everything seemed lost, there was the faintest voice whispering from within. You can let this be your end, or you can rise, and one day tell the world the truth they chose not to see. Just when Aurora thought the worst was over, another nightmare crept in. Not from behind a closed door, but from the mouths of people she once trusted. Whispers turned to stories. Stories became judgment. They said she had an old lover. They claimed she had betrayed her husband, that she was never pure to begin with. No one asked her side. They didn't need to. A woman's silence was easier to ignore than a man's lies spoken with confidence. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors glanced at her with pitiful eyes, then gossiped the moment she passed. Even those who once smiled at her now avoided her gaze. They chose to believe him, the wealthy, respected man, rather than the broken, tearful girl left behind. She became the center of rumors in every small gathering, the villain in a story she didn't write. The accused in a trial with no judge, no jury, just whispers and shame. Her body began to vanish in plain sight. No appetite, no words, no sleep. Just long nights staring into the ceiling, wondering if her heartbeat even mattered anymore. Depression didn't knock loudly. It slid in quietly, like fog wrapping around her soul, stealing color from her days and warmth from her nights. She stopped living. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. She was gone. She became a shadow in her own life, too tired to fight, too broken to run. But somewhere, hidden deep inside the ruins of her spirit, a spark remained. Tiny, barely alive, but real. And sometimes a single spark is all it takes to light a fire. It was just an ordinary day. The mall buzzed with noise and lights, and Aurora was simply walking, not chasing anything, not running from anything, until she saw him. There he was, the man from her past, Dressed sharp, charming as ever, his arm wrapped around a glamorous woman in designer clothes. Picture perfect, but Aurora knew what lay beneath the frame. He paused. Recognition flickered. Then a smile, as if their past was a scene from a forgotten play. Then softly he said it. I am sorry. He spoke of regret, of wrong choices, of how he chased status, wealth, and made a mistake he could not undo, that she was the one he should have held on to. But Aurora did not flinch. She stood tall, not as the broken girl he left behind, but as the woman she had fought to become. Her voice was calm, her eyes steady. I am not the girl you once knew. I do not hate you. I do not love you. I have healed, and I have let go, not for you, but for me. She did not need justice or revenge. She needed peace. And forgiveness was her path to freedom, not an invitation to return. As she turned away, her steps light, her heart steady, Aurora did not just walk out of that shopping mall. She walked out of every shadow that ever tried to swallow her. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled, not for someone else, but for herself. There was a time Aurora believed she'd never escape the darkness, the silence, the shame, the whispers that clung to her like chains. But in the stillness of her deepest despair, she realized one powerful truth. No one was coming to rescue her. If she wanted light, she would have to become it. So she rose, slowly, painfully. Day by day, she fought to reclaim herself. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't glamorous. It was messy. Some mornings she cried before even getting out of bed, but she got up anyway. She chose healing over hiding, chose courage over comfort, chose to rebuild a life with her own hands, brick by brick. She began to learn how to breathe deeply, how to forgive herself, how to say no without guilt. The mirror no longer reflected a broken girl, but a woman shaped by fire. Her scars, once a source of shame, now became her strength. She wore them like armor. Aurora stopped apologizing for existing. She no longer lowered her voice or eyes. She had found something unshakable within herself, something no one could take away. And then the moment she had stopped hoping for came quietly. Her family, once distant and doubtful, began to see her again. They didn't ask for details. They didn't need to. They saw her strength. They heard her silence. And they chose to believe her. They embraced her not as someone to be pitied, but as someone to be proud of. Aurora didn't need an apology. What she needed was to be seen, truly seen, and now finally she was. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. As a woman who had fallen, bled, and risen again. Unbreakable. Aurora knew too well what it felt like to scream silently, to cry in the dark while the world dismissed your pain as weakness. But through her suffering, she discovered something powerful, a purpose that extended beyond her own healing. She started small. Quiet conversations, gentle check-ins, late-night messages from girls who were also drowning in the same storm. They didn't need someone perfect. They needed someone who understood. And Aurora did. That's how the support group began. No banners, no media attention, just a circle of survivors learning how to breathe again. Aurora didn't preach. She didn't lead from a pedestal. She sat beside them. She listened. She reminded them of something they had forgotten for far too long, that their lives mattered. She didn't teach them how to forget. She taught them how to rise, how to wear their scars with pride, not shame, how to stop apologizing for being hurt, how to speak even when their voices trembled, to break the silence that had once nearly broken them. Each week, they grew stronger, not because their pain vanished, but because they stopped hiding it. Together, they created a safe space where dignity was not earned, but given, where tears were not weakness, but evidence of survival. And before every session ended, Aurora left them with a message. Not a cliche, not a quote, but a truth they needed to hear again and again. You are not wrong. You are not weak. Never beg for love. Choose the place where you are respected. This is not just Aurora's story. It's the untold story of thousands of women who were forced to live a life they never chose. As parents, we all want the best for our children. But sometimes in that desire, we forget one crucial truth. Our daughters are not chess pieces to be matched. They are not part of a transaction. They are human beings with dreams, emotions, and the sacred right to choose their own happiness. Marriage is not a social achievement. It is not about appearances or family status. When the exterior is grand, but the inside is full of silent suffering, it's not a marriage. It's a prison without bars. Let your daughter love. Let her choose. Let her say no. Let her make mistakes, fall, rise, and walk her own path. Because at least then she'll be living her own truth, not someone else's decision. A lifetime is too long to be spent beside someone who does not love or respect you. But it's also too short to be wasted in silent endurance. It's time for society to change. No more judgment. No more shame. No more silence for those brave enough to walk away from a life of pain. Teach our children that freedom of choice is not selfish. It's dignity. And real love always comes with respect. If you are listening to these words and your heart feels heavy because you see a part of yourself in this story, if you have ever cried in silence at night not knowing who to turn to, if you have ever sat in a dark corner with trembling hands reading lies and accusations from people who never truly knew you, then hear this. You are not alone. Aurora's story is not just one person's pain. It is a voice for thousands who have been silenced, judged, and stripped of the right to choose their own lives. But no matter how broken you feel, no matter how long you've suffered in the dark, you are still worthy of love, of respect, of healing. You are not a mistake. You are not weak, and your pain does not define you. You don't need to hide the scars. Sometimes the cracks in us are where the light enters. So speak. Share your story, even if it's just a memory, a sentence, or a quiet tear, because your voice might be the reason someone else finds their courage to stand. And if this story touched something inside you, even for a moment, we invite you to let us know. Leave a comment so your voice can be heard. Hit like if you believe stories like this deserve to be shared. Share this video with someone who needs to hear they are not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to Kunzy Podcast English, where we don't just tell stories, we give voice to the unheard. Because no one was born to be invisible. No one was born to suffer in silence. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be respected. And more than anything, you deserve to be heard.